magic. How are you doing? This is Martin from Gardens for Life. In this video we're going to show you how we wax our cheese. This is actually vintage cheddar, and cheese actually becomes better over time the longer you store it for, same as wine. If you're interested in this sort of thing, you should probably have a look at our homesteading workshop day here in Roscommon in the Midlands of Ireland. We cover the basics of growing your own food using no-dig gardening, preserving food, keeping chickens for egg production, herbal remedies, backup power and lights, and home brewing. So there's something in it for everyone. Take a look, and I'll put a link below. You can have a look at the demo video at the end of this video. There's a link or below, and hopefully we'll see some of you there. It's well worth waxing cheese, especially cheddar. Well, that's just our favourite. But you can wax any hard cheese at all that is hard enough so that it stays dry, so you can actually get the wax to stick to it. Especially cheddar and Parmesan is easy to wax. You can also wax Gouda and Edam and those kind of cheeses, but just make sure that they're mature enough so that they're not too squishy. That's how you'll know if there's a lot of moisture in it. And you can also dry them at room temperature for a few days if you have to. We usually dry our cheddar for 1 to 2 days. Apparently turning it every 2 weeks will actually make it last longer, but you can make cheese that's waxed last for up to 20 years without refrigeration. Imagine that. But the cheese will get better with age, like a lot of things, same as wine as well. And that's always an asset. We do enjoy our vintage cheddar and the 3-year-old Parmesan or Parmesan. So this is actually cheese wax before you melt it. It comes in a big lump like that. And it's just like candle wax. It takes forever to melt without boiling it. So we better get on with it. Once the pot warms up, we can turn it down a bit. We keep swirling it around. So as the wax melts in the bottom, you can swirl the lump around. It'll help it. It'll help it liquefy. This is approximately 2 kilos of cheese wax, just so you know, and there's about 1 kilo worth here. So to do this much cheese, it takes at least 1 kilo, maybe a bit more, maybe 1.5 kilos. To give you an idea. And this is maybe a half a year's supply of cheese for a small family. So if you are buying it, it's worth buying a bit extra because the postage is so expensive from Poland, which is the only place you can get it in, that I know of anyway. At a reasonable price, of course, that is. Yeah, we'll just turn that down. Just a little bit. You're going to be careful with wax because you don't want to bring it to the boiling point because it can be quite dangerous. It can catch on fire, of course. And definitely don't throw water on it ever when it's hot, or if it's actually putting out flames. That's the last thing you want to do because that causes a chemical reaction and it actually causes a huge fire. So you want to heat it up slowly. It'll take time now. It'll probably take about half an hour at least to melt that block. And we have our smallest hob turned down to the smallest setting. One thing we need is vinegar. Any old vinegar will do fine. And we pour that into a saucepan or a bowl. And we pour in enough so that we can dip the cheese into it from both sides. It's kind of like a melting iceberg. It's nearly there. Probably another 10 minutes. It does take quite a while. Here's a top tip for you. When you're putting down your knife that has been dipped in wax, especially if it's fresh, just put it on over an edge and then it'll be okay. I'm going to put a lid on that, but I'm going to keep a close eye on it every minute or two. Don't want to boil the wax. When you're handling your cheese, you have to make sure you wash your hands very well just before you handle it, and don't touch anything else at all in between. And you've got to dip it in vinegar first. So we're here now with our very clean hands, so we're going to dip the cheese in the vinegar. Dip it like that, and then the other side. That'll help to disinfect the cheese, and we're going to put it aside. Now we let that dry off for about 10 minutes or so, or maybe longer, no harm. And then we might have to use more paper towels to actually dry it off a bit more. Very fresh paper towels, of course. And then we're going to wax it. That's them all dipped in vinegar now. So we're going to let them dry off a little bit, and then we might have to finish them off with a paper towel. So we want to use some fresh towels that have just been washed. Put those down first. Now I've just washed my hands again once more. I must have washed my hands about 5 or 6 times since the beginning of this process. So we have a board here, a wooden board. It's where we're going to put the wax. And you can absolutely take it off the cooker to do the job. I'm going to keep the lid on for a minute because I'm going to dry off some of these first, the cheeses. And it's okay that the wax is cooling down slowly. You want to get all of the cheeses a quick hot dip after you dry them, and then after that it's okay if they're not as hot, the dips. So it'll just leave a thicker layer, but if it's not hot enough, it won't actually bind with the other layers of wax. So it's better to keep it fairly hot anyway. Not quite at boiling point, but maybe about 70, 80 or 90 degrees. Let me just show you that here now. No more lumps in it. Make sure there's no lumps in it. Otherwise it'll stick to the cheese you dip in it. What I'm just going to do is I'm just going to take some paper. I'm just going to clean these, or dry them I should say. Okay, I'm just going to put that over here. Just going to do a few of them. We're going to start dipping. can dip it this way or the other way, it doesn't really make a difference. There's no harm at all. Dip it, don't dip your fingers because it's quite hot. You can see how it straight away when you take it out, the layer of wax actually, you can see how it dries. And we're going to put that upside down over here on the fresh towel. Okay, I'm not going to touch the wax, of course. Let it cool down first. No harm in dipping it twice too, but you have to let it cool down first before it makes sense to dip them again. I see the Parmesan is already dry. It was a fairly dry cheese anyway, so we're going to dip that. Might dip that again. It's pretty good. Oops, I went a little bit over it there. You want to make sure you have somewhere to put the cheese down so that you don't get that wax on your towels while the wax is still liquidy. Yeah, that's already kind of dry. Remember folks, we are still learning too. No, that's better. That again. See, I have a place to put it now. There you go. Next one. Waxing cheese is actually quite fun, and it's what a great way to preserve your cheese without having to have a fridge or a freezer. Now we can start taking our other pieces of cheese that have already been waxed on one side. We can grab it by the wax side and dip it. And look at that. You have to make sure you overlap it very well. And then we turn it upside down like this. And we put it over here on the towel. At this point you want to make sure you don't mix up your red and your white cheese if the blocks are the same shape, because you won't know the difference anymore. Just put the white cheeses in one row and the red cheese in the other row. Oops. Ooh, that wax is hot. When you dip your finger into it, it can hurt quite a bit. Always gotta make sure you wax it over the halfway mark. With red wax, it's actually easier to see. With yellow wax, you can imagine, well, it's the same color as the cheese, so it'll be hard to see how far you've waxed. Once you hold it up against the light, it'll be alright. You can see it then. Actually, it's easier to do one at a time because then you have two hands to handle it. After you dip it, you can then handle it like this. Always kind of handle it like this and keep turning it so that the wax doesn't drip down one side. If you get bubbles like that, you just dip it again. And that'll fill in the hole. Remember, you can wax any hard cheese, but with Gouda it is a bit hard. You have to really dry it a bit longer than the cheddar and any other hard cheese, like mature hard cheese like Parmesan, especially because it's 16 months old and it would have lost a lot of its moisture. But I'm not sure how this is going to go. The Gouda should do fine. It's a little bit soft. So it'd be better to dry it out a bit more, but I don't really want to bother firing up my wax and liquefying it again for an hour another time just to wax these 4 pieces of cheese. I don't think it's worthwhile, so I'm just going to take a little risk and actually wax these now. Dry them off a little bit first. Let's see how it goes. It's always worth doing little experiments. It's like magic. Cheese does need to be fairly dry, otherwise the wax won't stick to it. So we'll see how that goes with the Gouda. But as per our previous experience, the cheddar, the mature cheddar, will be fine after you dry it for a day. 2 days would be better, but 1 day should do the job. As you can see, it is sticking fairly well. You can see how the corner of it here is kind of peeling away, but we're going to cover it in 2 more layers. It'll be okay. You're looking at 3 layers in total, so you always go with your oldest stack first, whichever ones you've done last basically. You leave for the longest time, just to make sure that the wax gets a bit of time to harden. And you could actually do this in a cold room, it'll definitely help. You could also put the cheese into a fridge beforehand. But because you're drying it outside in room temperature, typically speaking, the cheese won't be cold when you start waxing it. So putting it in the fridge after you dry it would be an extra step. But it would help to dry it quicker. But it's not necessary. Always turn it, because otherwise you're going to get a lip or a bubble. Not a bubble, you get some streaks running down the side. As you keep turning, and especially let the wax escape from the corner, you can see it ends up fairly clean. That Parmesan is already 16 months old, so I can't wait to try it when it's 30 months old or 36 months old, because the one in the shop that is 3 years old is very expensive. Nearly twice the price actually, I think. And rightly so, because it's so much better. Mature cheese, the older it gets, same as wine, the better it is. Just need to remember which layer or where we were at. I think we better warm up the wax a little bit more again, or heat it up. There are some little bubbles on the top of the cheese, so I think we should definitely heat it up again, just in case it's not hot enough. So here's how you know whether you have put on enough layers, even if you don't count them, or whether you do or not. You can just feel the cheese and see if it's still a bit soft after the cheese wax actually dries fully. This is definitely a little bit soft. I think I'll go for another full layer, which means both halves individually dipped. So yeah, we definitely need to put on a bit more there. See, you can see how I can kind of push that in a little bit. So you can also bring up the pot a little bit so you can still dip it to the halfway point, even if you don't have that much wax in the pot. And if you get these little bubbles, it's worth actually dipping it one more time in an attempt to get rid of them. You can also carefully blow at it just to get it started drying and then set it down. You'll also find that this Gouda, for example, is actually young Gouda. It is a bit too soft to wax now. I think definitely I would have been better off to actually wait and dry it a little bit more. So it's probably better to use mature cheese or hard cheese that's already been fairly well matured, so that it's drier to begin with, because the wax will actually stick to it better. You can see how the cracks kind of start forming there. If I go over that a couple more times, then I think it'll be okay. See that? That's going to develop mold. If you see that in the corner here, how that's open, it's because there's too much moisture in the cheese, I think. We'll see. We'll give it one more go. Hopefully it'll do the job. If not, we'll take it and put it in the fridge and eat it. And for that reason, don't be alarmed or don't be feeling sorry for a cheese actually opening up a little bit on the side or on the corner, because you can simply eat it first. But you gotta keep an eye on your cheeses, at least for the first while, because any of the ones that do actually crack, where the wax actually cracks on the sides or the edges, those ones are best eaten first. So that's 3 layers done on each of these blocks of cheese, and that should do the job. Definitely doesn't feel squishy anymore, not too bad. If you had to, you could always dip it again. Just need to make sure that the wax is actually hot enough so that it actually fuses with the existing layers of wax. We've dipped this 3 times in each direction. We have 3 layers all around, maybe a little more in the middle where it overlaps. So what we do now with this cheese is simply store it in a box, like a plastic box with a lid in the shed, so that's rodent proof, and it's better to let it breed and actually turn it every 2 weeks. It's better to turn it, so I heard. Somebody said that on the internet in another video. And just because the oils will actually go down inside the cheese block, so it's better to turn it every 2 weeks so that the oil doesn't stay stagnant in the bottom of the cheese block. But nevertheless, it'll last for up to 20 years, and it gets better as it ages, like most things. Thanks a million for watching the video. If you'd like to ask us any questions about wax and cheese, remember that we're only beginners ourselves, but nevertheless, if you have any questions and we are able to help, we'll try. Leave it in the comments below. Time to eat some cheese. Bye bye, see you in the next video. hopefully that gives you an idea of what we talk about here at our homesteading workshop day. Again, if you're interested in booking a place or two, just take a look at the link below. The November's ones are all sold out already, but we still have a few places left for December the 11th. And we'll be putting on more of them in January and so on. So keep an eye out. Bye bye. Thanks for watching.